So guys, I'm out here on the stream and I thought this would be a perfect way to go into another video for you. And that's going to be a fly tying tutorial. It's going to be the first one for the 5-weight channel, and I thought that I would tie one of my favorite fly patterns from the last year and a half or so, and that's the Jack Daniels. If you tie some of these up and you go on your local streams, you could dig into one of these. Absolutely beautiful brown trout caught on the Jack Daniels, a size 16 with a copper bead. I'm going to tie that one up for you now. Stay tuned. All right, well, welcome to the first 5-weight outdoors fly tying tutorial. I figured I would start doing these since I tie so many flies, and I do it all the time. So I figured I would start doing a tutorial. I have some patterns that I've designed myself. I'll be tying a lot of patterns that were designed by other people. And our first one that we're going to be doing is actually designed by Old Dominion Trout Bub. You can find his channel. I'll link it in the description below. But when he first came out with this fly, I think it was last year, I saw his video, I tried it out, and it absolutely dominated. This fly deserves to be in an Umpqua or a Fulling Mill catalog because it is a game changer. It's become a staple in my fly box. I use it all the time. I used it all winter long. I got the fly down to a size 18 and it worked phenomenal. It imitates so many different bugs in the stream depending on the size, but I like how thin the body is. I like how durable it is. I like how basic and easy it is to tie. And so I really appreciate him sharing this to the public. And so I figured this would be the first one that I tie because I tie so many of these and I do end up losing a lot of these too. So let's get to tying this one up. We'll get started right behind the bead here. Just a couple turns. And we'll snip this off. So what we use is for most of my flies, or what I use for most of my flies, is Coq De Leon for the tailing fibers on most of my Perdigons, thread Frenchies, even pheasant tails. I'll use Coq De Leon. It's just so much more durable, and it holds up a lot longer. So I use about 4 to 5 fibers. I don't go really any more than that. And then on this one, I got about 4 fibers here. I line up the tips, and then I'll pull it right off the stem and keep the tips aligned. It's important. From there, I'm going to measure the shank of the hook, and I'll go ahead and do a pin trap. Pinch that right on top of the shank of the hook. Check my measurement on there, make sure it looks good. And I'll make sure my thread is flat, and then I'll work it right down the shank. Now I'm one of those guys that I like to put the wrap behind the tailing or the tail. I like them to stick up a little bit because when they go in my fly box, they do get matted down a little bit. So I'll just put a little spin on just to cord it up a little bit. And I'll go right behind the fly, the tails. I'll pull it in and they just kind of stick up a little bit, and it makes them flare out a little bit. I like to do that. I know not everyone does that, but that's just something that I do. So then I'll flatten the thread back out. Just spinning it counterclockwise. And then I'll go right touching turns. Right back up the shank of the hook. Just getting it flat again here. And so I'm going to leave a gap right about there from behind the bead and leave that little cave area there. It's important for that to get to this point and leave that cave that little space there, just for the end of the fly when we're gonna put the dubbing loop in the CDC. So just one more turn there. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna build up a taper on this fly. Old Dominion Trout Bum is very good at keeping his flies very consistent, and he's pretty adamant about it, and I love that. They have all the same flies, the same size, and the one thing he does is he puts a nice taper on all of his flies. He's going to go all the way down about 3/4 of the way, and then he's going to come up. And just touching turns, making sure the thread is flat. And it just keeps it very, very consistent. And then we're going to go about halfway now, keeping the thread flat. Right till about the hook point. Just be careful you don't catch that hook point on the thread and nick your thread. And then we're going to go back up. And then we're going to do about 1/4 of the way. And then back up. And then from here, we're going to spin it again, making it flat. And then we're going to go all the way down to the end of the towards the tail. Just I want touching turns, so I got to get that flatter. Just makes a nice, smooth body with a beautiful taper. And like he said, when he ties this, if you do that the same every single time, your flies are all going to turn out exactly the same. So from here, we're going to take a Sharpie, and we're actually going to paint the rib, or put the black Sharpie on the thread. And this is going to make the rib of the fly. Instead of adding bulk to the fly with a wire or putting out some other ribbing material in there, this is a really simple way to do it. So then we're going to cord it right up by spinning the bobbin clockwise. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go one. Actually, let me go take this back here. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, just about 5. And then from here, I'm just going to do a 2-turn whip finish. Oh, I did 3 there. Not a big deal. And we're going to trim that off. And like I mentioned before, this fly does have UV resin, and we're just going to paint a nice thin coat of UV resin on here. You don't need much. Normally I'll use like a makeup brush or some little tiny brush to put it on there, but I kind of ran out of those. So just a very thin coat. And if you think you got too much, just wipe off the excess on the bottle, come back in and kind of just make that little carrot shape. You can also take your fingers and take a little off that way. That looks good right there. Then we're going to go ahead and just take the UV light and fry her right up. It puts a really nice cure, and that ribbing really stands out. And that's where I see where he mentioned how important the thread is on this fly, because the other tan versions that I've used in the Vivis or in the Textreme is that it gets too dark with the UV resin, and the rib doesn't really show up very well. So once that's done, we're going to switch over to a new thread, and the thread that he recommends, and I use this thread a lot on flies when I really have to yank down or yarn down on some flies, is GSP. It doesn't really matter the color, just make sure it's a 30 den. And what we're going to do is we're going to get where that cave is that we made earlier. We're going to get right behind there, and we're just going to tie that in. I'm going to snip it off. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make a dubbing loop. We're going to go around once, 2 times, and then we'll just leave the bobbin right there. And we're going to take our dubbing twister. I use a Stomfo dubbing twister. I love this thing. I've tried others in the past, but this one was a little bit more pricey, and it works phenomenal. You could take the top off and really get some wraps. You can angle it any way you want to. So from here, we are going to take some dubbing, and the dubbing that he recommended was Spectra dubbing number 46. So we're going to make about 1 inch to 3/4 of an inch dubbing noodle. Very thin, you don't need much. And we're going to put that on one side of the dubbing noodle, or on the dubbing loop. That looks about good there. We're going to slide that up. Make sure it's nice and tight. That looks good there. It's about 1 inch. And this is the reason for the little cave that we made behind the bead. So this dubbing can go into there, pull that bead tight, because you can see how loose that bead is. Pulls the bead tight and it sinks right in there. It doesn't make the collar look overbearing and big. From here, I'm going to take some CDC. Now I use a dark tan CDC. I use a Dohiku. I don't know if you could see that or not. In a tan. This is what I have on hand. I do have some other colors. I have like a khaki, a gray. But I found this one works really well because the other feathers I have are really big, and I don't want to waste those feathers for my dry flies that I tie. So these are very small, and it makes a perfect size for flies like this. So on my dubbing clip, what I do is I take the feather, and I take one side of the feather, and I'll take my clip, and I'll clip off about 1/2 inch based on the marks that I have. And then what I'll do is I'll put that into the dubbing loop with the dubbing noodle. Get that in there. And sorry about my dog coming down the stairs there. And then we're going to spin this right up. Now the one thing he was adamant about when tying this fly was not having a ton of CDC. The CDC slows the sink rate down. The more you have, it slows the sink rate. Now this fly is very thin, so it works very well for getting down. It's almost like a Perdigon with a little bit of CDC. It sinks so well. So we're going to start tying, and we're going to tie from the rear of that, if you can see, that rear of the taper, and move forward towards the bead. We'll do one, and then once we get into the CDC here, I'm going to start pulling back the fibers, and then just keep wrapping forward. Pulling these fibers back, making it look nice and neat. Keep pulling them forward. And then I'll just finish this up right here. And now we're going to lock it in. So I'm going to do 2 wraps behind, pull it tight. You can hear it click in there too. Right behind. And then we're going to do 2 in the front. Pull it down nice and tight. And then we're going to trim this off. Now just from here, I'm going to do one wrap just to secure it in. And we're going to take some super glue and we're going to do a 3-turn whip finish here. So put a little super glue down and do a 3-turn whip finish. And lock that into place. Now he doesn't do whip finishes at the end. And the way he does it, it will secure it for sure. For me, I just like, it's just security. It's just a personal preference for me. So that's it. This is a phenomenal fly. It is definitely my go-to pattern that I fish all the time. It sinks well. It's so buggy. It looks like a lot of things in the stream. Like I said before, this fly deserves to be in a catalog. And shout out to Old Dominion Trout Bomb for opening this up to the public for everybody to tie and use, because it does. It is a producer. It works so, so well. And yeah, make sure you guys like and subscribe, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thanks for watching.